or inclusive-based hiring. And they say specifically, merit is a, quote, myth. They say it's a harmful heuristic. They say you can't be measuring people on merit. It's actually an oppressive structure. And then in their documentation, officially, they say you have to measure people, you have to recruit people on the basis of identity. You have to filter people on the basis of diversity statements, so loyalty oaths to left-wing ideology. You have to pepper the job descriptions with social justice buzzwords like race, equity, social justice, et cetera. And then at the end of the process, you have to have a quota of at least one woman and one minority on the final selection for the job. And if you can't get that race and sex quota, you have to scrap the hiring process and start at the beginning. And they have then guidance on the metrics that they want to hit. And so we have to choose as the public, as the ultimate authority over public institutions. We have to choose. Do you want a hiring system based on identity quotas and political litmus tests? Or do you want to have a hiring system based on excellence of scholarship and demonstrable merit? And look, people are smart, they're adaptable. If you set the standard, they'll figure out ways to meet it. But right now, we have the worst of both worlds. We have officially in our law anti-discrimination, but unofficially, the de facto law of our institutions is explicit and purposeful race and sex discrimination in service of left-wing ideology. And so we have a very clear problem. We actually have what is really at heart a violation of the very basic social compact that defines our democratic institutions. I mean, you know, John Locke would his head would explode if he saw what's happening. You say this is a violation of our basic constitutional structure, and the centrist position, which is, well, you know, we can't do anything. Don't get the legislature involved. The government should not interfere with the government, is such an abdication that it actually enables tyranny. Because if the government is acting against the people without the consent of the people through their legislators to pursue its own ideological ends, that is the definition of tyranny. And yeah, it's a kind of soft, equity-based tyranny, but it's tyranny nonetheless, and it undermines the basic structure of our democracy. And I think Governor DeSantis, what he's doing ultimately, is he's restoring public authority over public institutions. All of the BS about that this is a government overreach, that's ridiculous. The government determines the government. You can't, you know, it's like saying the people have no authority to regulate the government. I mean, it's so tyrannical, it's so totalitarian. It's like the DeSantis move at heart, the actual substantive core of it, is reinvigorating the democratic structures, reinvigorating legislative oversight over public institutions, and giving the people a voice in the constitution of the institutions that teach their children. I mean, if we cannot have that, I mean, we should give up. Democracy has lost any kind of substantive meaning. It's procedural and intellectual and a kind of phantom democracy only.
Well, Christopher, I'm going to leave you with that last word. That's a pretty damn good closing statement. It was a...
Did I persuade you, though? I mean, that's the key question for me is, are you with us? Do you support the legislation to abolish DEI, abolish diversity statements, abolish mandatory ideological training, abolish racial discrimination in public universities? Do I have your support?
Well, look, what I would say about our conversation today is that you addressed all the concerns that I had. I wasn't doubtful about the necessity for what you were doing to begin with. You know, I was concerned about the level of analysis that was being utilized. I was concerned that it might be too vague and that it could devolve into something like, you know, a conservative witch hunt on the right, because it isn't necessarily the case that it's going to be you pursuing this in 10 years. It could easily be someone who doesn't have anywhere near your intellectual capacity. And so that bothered me. It's not easy to put constraints around a set of ideas. And I tried to torture you today as best I could on that front. And I think you responded, you know, with exceptional detail and clarity. And so I'm feeling a hell of a lot better about the situation. I don't have any questions left that I haven't asked you and that you didn't answer sufficiently. So, and I didn't start this conversation as an opponent to what's been happening in Florida. I started this conversation as a concerned person who has seen the cataclysmic effects of this radical leftist ideology, especially in higher education, but now increasingly in K through 12, and is hoping on all fronts that something can be done about it. And so I'm much more, what would you say, convinced, much more reassured that you and the people who are doing this have thought this through to the proper level of detail. So, and if I have other questions that pop up, and no doubt there will be some, then I'll be more than happy to, let those be known. I'd like to think about what I'm doing in this conversation as a benevolent critic, because this is so important to get this right that I don't want to see anybody slip up. And you guys are taking very forthright action, and hopefully there aren't any snakes lurking under the carpet, right? Because I'm always looking for snakes lurking under the carpet. And so far in this conversation today, you haven't revealed any new snakes. So that's pretty much how I look at that situation. So look, we should wrap this up. We've gone for a requisite 90 minutes, and like I said, you made a pretty damn compelling closing statement there. I appreciate very much you taking the time to walk through this with me today, and for you to share what you've been doing, so forthrightly with everybody who's listening and watching. I'm sure there'll be plenty of people paying careful attention, especially parents who should particularly pay attention to this conversation, who are, interested in what's happening in Florida and elsewhere, but also leery about it. And so my suspicions are they're going to feel a lot more confident about this attempt to restructure than they might have before the conversation. So that's probably a success on your front. I guess we'll see what the public commentary is like. So I'd like to thank you very much for agreeing to talk to me today. To everybody who's watching and listening on YouTube and its associated platforms, thanks for your time and attention. To the Daily Wire Plus people for facilitating this conversation, that's much appreciated. Film crew here in Tulsa, because that's where I am today, who made this possible without any technical flaw or screw up. That's always much appreciated. And Chris, we're going to move over to the Daily Wire Plus platform now, and I'm going to spend half an hour with you talking more autobiographically. I'm interested in getting into a little bit more detail about how your intellectual interests developed across time. And I'm thanks again for agreeing to talk to me. It was a pleasure getting to know you a bit more. Hello, everyone. I would encourage you to continue listening to my conversation with my guest on dailywireplus.com.